All right. Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Mary Ellen Slayter, and I'm the CEO and founder of RevCap. We're a content marketing agency that specializes in financial services, HR tech, and insurance. And, I've had the business now for 10 years, and I in part chose those specializations because of my previous experiences as a traditional reporter, an editor in the media. And I actually covered as a financial editor at the Washington Post for many years. And then I went on to work at SmartBrief, which many of you are probably familiar with. And I oversaw all of the financial newsletters and built up those audiences. And so financial services remains dear to my heart. I think it's the most challenging of the industries that we work in. I think it's because we have to navigate it. It isn't just about being creative, right? When you sit down and you make a brief and you talk about brand here doesn't just mean the colors and the font and the logo. It also, compliance comes into play, actual legal compliance. We have to be very careful what we promise people, both as a matter of ethics, but also as a matter of regulatory environment. However, that doesn't mean that we can't make awesome content in financial services. And I think one of the most interesting things to me when I start to work in this space is this level of fearfulness around content. But the reality is, like, content marketing in some ways, like financial services was doing content marketing before the rest of the world even knew what that was and had any idea like what the name of it, what to call that. And I've always thought, like, in some ways, like, they're the leaders, but then they're also the laggards in other ways, because, the principles of content marketing, which is investing in high quality content to help your customers make better decisions. Like I said, that's something that financial services was a pioneer on. I think what has changed is the sheer volume of content required to keep pace and the variety of channels that we have to access in order to promote things. I mean, it's like, as a bank, it's easy for a consumer brand, a consumer like a retail brand to say, oh, let's go start a TikTok channel. Should we start a TikTok channel is a much more nuanced question if you're a bank, right? So I think I want us to keep in mind sort of those same principles. Going back to that, it's like, I can help you make better decisions. And sometimes that has been information that's been available on the website kind of openly. In other cases, it's been things that were proprietary and only shared with customers. But either way, I just want to make sure you realize, content marketing and financial services have gone together before they even had a word for it. So the goal here with content and financial services, just like with any other content marketing strategy, is it's a path to build trust, and do it at scale. So if you think about the traditional banking relationships, whether it's consumer banking or business banking, investment banking, it's all about these personal relationships between, people. And the more dependent you are, so that's a wonderful thing. Like, someone trusts their banker, someone trusts their advisor. There's also an inherent risk in that. If all the trust is loaded into the advisor and into the banker and into that person, that is trust that is not necessarily imbued in your brand. So content gives us a way to bridge that gap and take that expertise and take that relationship and help accrue that to the brand, not just to an individual doing a job. So this goes back to the first question. I said trust, right? So trust has always been critical in financial services, and trust has gotten more challenging in terms of for financial services for other industries. I mean, Morning Consult did a survey that did confirm, which I think we all know, that consumers do hold their financial service providers to a much higher standard for trust, honesty, and for data privacy in particular. And that's something that has often also come into play in terms of what data we collect about our customers in financial services and what we do with that data. So I would even say in many cases, financial services have been holding themselves to a higher standard on that front than even what was required by the EU whenever we got to those tighter regulations. So overall, so the part of that trust, that's wonderful, right? They trust us. The bad news is, if you do anything to break that trust, they're out. They, of all the industries that in that Morning Consult survey, which I'll share with y'all in the links, of all the industries that were they surveyed about there, that's the one that is most likely to end it immediately over any kind of broken trust. You can't come back from that. So they actually come on only second to healthcare when it came to their data expectations. So what does that have to do with our content? So one, we have to be careful what we create. We have to be careful how we distribute it. And we have to be careful with the data that we collect based on that information. So there's a couple of different types of content we can make in in financial services. And I think sometimes people jump straight to some very basic content, which is fine. If this is your entry level, if you don't have a blog and you're a financial services institution in 2023, like, let's just go start there. Okay. Let's get a blog going. Let's get an email newsletter going. Let's get the processes in place to begin to like send those things on the most basic level. So this is where SEO content, like that's the entry point. If you're not making that kind of content, it's going to be tough to do these next level things that I'm talking about. The other piece, the kind of content I want to talk about is thought leadership content. Way deeper investment, but also potentially a much bigger payoff in your differentiated voice. And then, the last thing, and I think a lot of financial services companies that do tip their toe in this, it's like they start to get into more lifestyle content. So these are things that are truly about just building the brand and building up positive associations. And that one, I think, is in some ways the hardest. And traditionally, although I would say, the big banks have actually done a pretty great job of that if you start looking at the Citibanks of the world. And one of my examples I'm going to share is from that. So depending on who your target audience is, that is what should guide the channels that you show up in, right? And that should guide like pretty much all these other decisions. So the first thing I want to talk about that I mentioned here, we're going to talk about brand voice. And what does brand voice mean for financial services? And I would say in some ways, banks in particular have been better at this, I think, than the average type industry in many ways. But what that means, you have to be kind of formal, but you don't have to be super stuffy. And so if you don't have that documented, which again, I'm going to say most financial institutions do have this stuff documented, or is it out of date? Like I think more often it's time to go back and take a look at it. Go look at that mission statement, go look at your values, go look at your voice. And again, I would say that most financial institutions do a better job than most of codifying this. The challenge comes whenever that gets translated into content, because I have seen where institutions will sit and spend extraordinary amounts of time and effort codifying their brand standards, and then it says nothing about content other than rules of things not to do. So there will be 100 pages of use this logo here, always use this color, always with the size, and here's our brand voice, and it'll be pretty pictures, here's our visuals that we use. And then there'll be one page stuck on the end, and it's just like, don't use forward-looking statements. Okay, well, that's not gonna get it. So what I would say is you want to work on what we call your content value proposition. So if your business's proposition, if your brand's value proposition is the benefit that the consumer, or the customer is going to get out of working with your institution, that needs to then be applied to the content. Like, I just really feel like those are just super disconnected often. Like, people will have these very well thought out value propositions, and then the content will be the most generic thing you've ever seen. So that's a big missed opportunity. So if you've taken your brand guidelines, go through them, take a look, see what you got going on, like in that, make sure that they're what you want. And now go look at your existing content. I want you to perform an audit, basically. Go pull the content that you've published in the last 6 months, or say 3 months, and ask yourself, like, where does this align with our value proposition? What line item in here does this actually match my brand? Does it match my voice? What is the CTA on this? Like, who did I make this content for? And I will say oftentimes the answer is someone who asked for it, like internally. It's often very internally driven, not market driven. The best financial institutions are using the data that they create. Like, you can use SEO data, you can use things like what their current website traffic is, and they use that to guide and make more. But all too often, this is actually an industry that is especially vulnerable to making content because some banker or some rep said, I want a blog post about this. And there winds up being no rhyme or reason to it. When you do this work, I want you to go ahead and prepare yourself to uncover a shocking level of inconsistency, especially if it's a very large organization. And if you don't have a centralized content function already, your subject matter experts are probably already actually producing more content than you realize. This is where I think this always gets really interesting. This happens in a lot of industries, but it especially happens in financial institutions. I will walk in and say, okay, so where's your content marketing? Oh, we don't have a head of content marketing. All right, well, so who's making your content? Oh, we don't really make any content. I was like, well, what's this on your website? What are you publishing on social? Like, where is this stuff coming from? Then you also start to dig in a little deeper, and you find out it is not uncommon for me to find out that people in independent branches and offices are making content and sending it out with very little oversight, depending on the size of the organization. And for the most part, it's harmless. I mean, it's just kind of harmless, generic stuff, but that stuff becomes your brand. If that's what's going out, it's like they send a newsletter to their own customers and they're doing it through Outlook. Nobody saw it, right? So you can say on one hand, well, that's not our content marketing. That's just that one rep sending out, information to their customers, one broker or one, advisor. But to the end user, that thing that they just got from that, like that email they got, that is the email newsletter from your brand. And if that's happening all over your organization, I mean, one, I just want to let you know it's super common. So when you start to discover that, like, don't beat yourself up too much about it. But that is one of the first things you're going to have to fight hard to wrest that control back. Like, expect that to be a pretty big change management function inside your organization. They're probably compliant on the visual branding. That's what I always find fascinating about this. It's just the voice, and it's the tone, and it's the quality of the actual copy. Or sometimes they're making videos, or it's just all over the place. So get this stuff in line. This is going to be, depending on the size of your organization and how decentralized you are, right? Like, how much control do you have over what happens out in the field offices? This could take some training sessions. This could take probably taking away some people's toys. Like, sometimes I find the most compliance obsessed organizations around technology and what people can and can't use, what people do, if you don't let people have a proper email service provider, like something like a campaign monitor, which I'm a big fan of because of their security practices and data practices, or a MailChimp, which is also acceptable in a pinch, or if you're using, some other, HubSpot, or depends on what you're doing, like some real email sending thing with real data and real controls. What people will do, that doesn't mean they don't send emails. It means they just go send it out of their personal email. It's going out of Outlook in bulk. And there's two problems with that. One, you don't know what they're sending and when they're sending it. Actually, it's more than two problems. Two, you don't know who is receiving it and how they're behaving after they receive it. It's a total lost opportunity for engagement data. And then three, probably the one that should set off the biggest alarm bells for you is that sending a mass email like that is one of the fastest tracks to get you in spam filters. And it's pretty hard to get your domain to come back from that. And so they think they're working because you're not giving them official channels, approved channels. They're going and doing these other things that are, frankly, more potentially damaging. All right. Any questions before I dig in? Because I realize I just dropped a lot with you on email, talking about email. Email is one of my favorite topics. So let's jump in then now next, and we're going to talk about original research. So research is a tried and true sales tool for banks, both consumer banks, especially if they serve a higher end clientele, like business banks and high net worth individuals, but also for other institutions like investment banks. So they often publish reports on companies, industries, or assets, whole countries, depending on the size of the bank, for paying clients. That same information for the really big banks is often distributed in a much simpler, cleaner form to the media via a press release. But if all that stuff is locked up behind I know you probably don't want to just give up all that information, but you can take some of that and begin to break that down into smaller assets that can be used to build trust in the content side. So you can use it for brand awareness. You can use it to nurture leads. You can use it ultimately to close new customers. You don't have to give up the whole report, but if you have one big report, you can then take that and break that up into a series of blog posts, infographics. You could use, specific pitches to specific journalists. Search engines actually love this type of content, authoritative content. And in the age of generative AI producing a lot of low quality content, which I think we should expect, that wave's already coming. This is the kind of thing that can't be easily duplicated. So if you're going to make it, don't just lock it up behind the customer wall. So the other thing that you can do, a lot of times financial institutions will, their PR strategy involves getting out there and doing market commentary. But if you've got real industry research and surveys to cite, that adds a lot of credibility and you are far more likely to get picked up. So that lets your content serve your PR strategy. All right, I'm going to pause here for just a minute. I have a question here from Nancy. It says, what type of content has the highest engagement? And I'm going to give the worst possible, most annoying answer here, but like, it depends. So some of the work that you're going to have to do is like going back and looking at who that buyer is, right? And I think what I think is interesting in financial services is we put a lot of attention into mapping products to people, right? So we're like, high net worth individuals need these type of product offering. This is what they're looking for. And here's how we're going to tailor our products to meet their needs. Low income, our younger people, they want these types of things. It's very important to them that they be able to access things on mobile. Like, we will put an extraordinary amount of attention to that. Well, but what we don't do is sit down and say, okay, now my young people who wanted all that mobile, what channel should I be doing creating content for them or marketing? And like, this is where you're probably going to have to walk compliance through and get kind of comfortable with this. And you're going to have some conversations. It's like, it's TikTok, right? It's like, it's Instagram Reels. Like, so you're going to have to map that. You're going to have to map those channels to those consumers, those buyers, that customer segment with the same level of attention that you map products to them. And frankly, products can be a pretty good indication of where you should put your attention. So if you've got a segment that is into mobile, you need to think about mobile friendly content. Like, if you already know, piggyback on your business data. So, and then if you have other types where it's like, okay, high net worth, but they work, like, it's like working rich, as they call it. It's like, okay, you start to say, okay, these people don't have a lot of leisure time. It turns out that like all their products are also mobile, and they like they're into the robo advisor thing. It's like, at that point, I start thinking interactive. I start thinking digital. I start thinking podcasts that they can listen to while they're driving. Think about the buyer, right? Or think about the customer in your case. And you'll find that like that can guide you. You can definitely piggyback on that information. The other thing that I find often comes up in financial services, more so than other industries, is that people in other spaces don't have any trouble getting their employees to share their content. And that is not natural in financial services. Like, it just doesn't seem, even within the marketing team, it takes a lot of effort to build that kind of employee advocacy program. And so I think if you want to make that part of your strategy, you have to if there's a big payoff for doing it, but you have to be very intentional. Just one, because of the types of roles you tend to have, and two, the general risk aversion that your employee base often has as well. So to get around this and also keep compliance happy, I would say I often recommend people create an employee advocacy program. So, and they're going to want you to tell them what to share and when. And there are some pretty helpful tools, like things like Pager and some others that make that easy to do. So when you put up a new blog post and you can push it out and you can alert all employees and you can say, here's the copy, you can choose from these, people will share based on that. But otherwise you can't just expect them to do it, because they'll be worried that they're going to say something wrong. So you really do need an internal communications plan that you need to map out in order to make this work. So the goal is to give everybody room to express themselves in their own voice, but keep them in line with compliance. And I find the best way to do that is formalize it. Give them, quick, not a 100-page document that tells them what they can and can't say, but give them like kind of a one-pager, give them some suggested stuff to share, and then reward it, track it and reward it. Next, I wanted to jump in and actually share some examples of great thought leadership content, specifically in financial services. And I'm going to share my screen just so we can kind of walk through some of these, because that's why is there not an official squad like there is in consumer marketing? There should be a squad. So a lot of times there's like one social person in the big institutions. There'll be like this one social media manager, and they are just responsible for putting things on the page. But like, you can do so much more if you can generally get people who will even volunteer for this. Like, you can make this kind of a part of their role. They can be almost the representatives from their divisions. It's pretty fun. All right. And then also got another question here about, do you create different video for TikTok and Instagram since they are different demos? I'm going to go ahead and say probably. So I think go back, map and think about who is in those places. So think about Insta as being for there's a lot of overlap. I don't want to generationally stereotype, because lots of people of lots of ages are on TikTok. Lots of people are on Facebook. Lots of people are on LinkedIn. And age is, I would say, only one of the factors that determines that. But this is also, you can start to publish the content and get the data and see like, okay, this is what they're engaging with. Like, this is what's working. So it may be, go back to like the kind of content you're creating for that segment. I would actually take a segment approach. And that's not something like very geared toward in tech. We call it the ICP, but in financial services, we think of it as that market segment. Make your content plan by your segment and take that all the way down to the channel. And sometimes there you may be putting the same stuff and sometimes you may not. All right, let's go take a look at some examples. I'm going to start with one that we worked on. So this is for Aon. It's a partnership between Aon and Voya, and it is in what they call the PEP Information Center. And this is one of the things that I actually think financial services as a class does super well. It's using content for educational purposes. And the secret to this is, again, mapped to your segment. So this particular link that I'm showing you right now, this is for a retirement planning segment. Again, partnership between Aon and Voya. And there's written content and there's things in here. But like one of the things that we were really excited about to support them on this is like we created a series of videos that were specific to certain target demographics and addressed concerns that those groups had about retirement. And so I'm just showing you one of them because here we are coming up on the end of Pride Month. We made one for the LGBTQ community. And this wasn't, we really, there was a lot of things that went into this. One was making sure that we chose imagery that would resonate with that community, but more deeply, there was a lot of research and a close partnership with the retirement and actuary experts at Aon to think about like, what are the real factors? Like, what are the things that we need to help these folks pay attention to and that are different from the general thing? So we really enjoyed making this. We actually wound up making them for a number of segments. Again, this was the Pride one. You know, we also made one for Hispanic families. We made one for Black families. We made one that was specific for women. And so, again, the more segmented, the better. Like financial services and financial decisions are very personal. They're very personal. But there's so much in here. Like that video was only part of it, but this is just a great little portal, and it has, it has a high level of engagement, and it's right there. This is putting content. This is content integrated with the product. This is right there. It's outside the gate, so anybody can see this. They've also reused this content in marketing campaigns, but the most critical piece of it is like helping people make better decisions in that moment. The next one I would like to share with y'all is another one where I mentioned early on that there's a segment of this where you kind of push back, you're almost into some lifestyle type things. So Life and Money by Citi, they've been publishing this for a few years. This is an award-winning magazine. We've contributed some pieces to it as well. But you can see this is very, I would call this very millennial targeted, just because of the nature of the stuff that they're writing about. But they do, I think they're more broad than that. Like images, they've got a lot of diversity in their content. So eco-friendly stuff. So in that sense, eco-friendly ways to save money and waste. So the money part is what you would expect out of a financial services magazine, brand magazine, but you might not expect like the eco-friendly part. They've got some small profiles of people who started small businesses, how to find a financial planner. You would expect that. But then there's Explore Miami's artsiest and buzziest neighborhood. And that is a good example of producing something that your audience segment is interested in that keeps this from feeling like any other bank's blog, right? There's a whole piece on bike sharing, which that makes sense because Citi Bike, they actually sponsor those programs. So they've used this content to amplify their other brand initiatives. They've drawn it's more about a lifestyle, and it's more about a lifestyle for those segments than it is about, let me tell you, it's not credit card rates. Yes, people go search for rates on credit cards, but that's not what's going to build your brand. And products and services are certainly available. You don't have to put it in people's face. Like every post doesn't have to be about, Citi's five best credit cards. That's not the point. What is the point is, what is that audience? What is that segment looking for? I love this magazine. Absolutely love it. The next one I want to share, this actually goes up into a slightly different angle, because the other two, the Aon PEP thing was like tied to your workplace, and it was a partnership, and it's more It's B2C, but it's business adjacent. Life and Money is a pure B2C play. This Morgan Stanley piece here, this is where we start to get into B2B, around B2B institutions and some thought leadership. These are some interviews that they do. It's called Exceptional Leaders, Exceptional Ideas, and they are not very long, but they go down, the firm's equity analysts sit down and they interview people at companies and ask them. They're not asking them about financial things. They're asking them about broad, foundational, economic drivers. And you've got a nice little trailer for it with some highlights. But so what I love about this, what I love about this, is they're using their individual analysts and their reputations, and they're building on that trust to build the brand. And they're leaning into that relationships, and they're also looking at customer relationships. In this case, yes, this is Morgan Stanley, and they can go get the CEO of Harley Davidson, and they can get the CEO of Northrop Grumman. Within your own market, there is an equivalent. So if you're a business bank in your local community, if you're a regional or community bank, there's the business leaders in your community. Interview those people. Take your bankers and pair them with those people. And I love these because they're video, but this could also just as easily for another brand be a podcast. These are just so good. They're so good. This is so much more interesting than just dumping a bunch of reports and opinion pieces. I can drop this in the link and share this after, but they're truly engaging. I consider this primo brand journalism. And they're not talking about the bank. Really at all. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. The last thing I want to show you is advisor resources. So this is Betterment, and I often think of Betterment. This is the Betterment for advisors, but there's also the main Betterment. I consider Betterment is one of the brands in financial services that we don't work with, but I'm the most jealous of them. A lot of the time, I go through sometimes and I see I get their emails because I went by a booth at HR Tech or something one year, one of the HR conferences, and I will just go ahead and tell you the Betterment's content team is that whatever they're doing over there, they should keep doing it because it's beautiful. This is an example. Betterment's got their consumer facing stuff, the things you would do, very, very well segmented. They've got things for, the general population. They've got things for HR. This is for the advisors. And this is a channel, right? So this is coming in and really creating very specific content that is for that audience. And they've got it in a bunch of different channels, right? So they've got thought leadership kind of insights. They've got product guides. They've got their technical help, but they've got blog posts that cover, helping millennials match their money with their values. They've got, stuff around technology, I don't know. It's a really nice mix. I can see how intentional this was. And they built out a robust, content hub for the segment. And I it's that one. It's a channel. It's again for channel growth, not a Betterment advisor yet. Oh, you can get started, get you a demo. So that was pretty cool. All right, so those are some of my favorite examples. I've got another question here. Said, how are audio only events working for this segment? Any that I could recommend? So audio only absolutely can work, and I can find you actually probably some good examples of podcasts. Actually, I'm going to go grab you one right quick. They can work, but again, think not about does audio work. Think about that segment and ask yourself, does this particular segment care about audio? And there's going to be people that is a good match for, and there's going to be people that is not a good match for. So I think of some really good ones that I've listened to. I think Putnam does some, PIMCO does some, but it's just really think about age, think about habits. Podcasts work best for, and I'm just getting audio broadly here. It works best for people who are already consuming audio. You as a branded content are not going to get somebody who doesn't listen to podcasts right now to start listening to a podcast so they'll listen to you. So if you're thinking audio is going to be your channel, take a look at your competitors, see who else is doing audio, take a look at your segment, see if they are into audio and where they like to consume it. And you're probably the best success we're seeing right now with audio is targeting inside apps, like inside the channels themselves, like wherever people are listening to podcasts. The other way that it can work really well is you need to have a big fat email list. So if you've got a big email list and you've got an audience, then you've got, because all podcasts and all audio pieces, really anything, starts off with an audience of 0. So you're going to have to piggyback off of your other stuff before that. I got a Deutsche Bank podcast, actually. We can kind of look at that one real quick. Give you a screen share on that. We can talk about like what they're doing well and what you might be able to apply. Audio, I spend a lot of time thinking about audio, actually, as does Michael. Michael spends most of his time thinking about audio content. So Deutsche Bank does a podcast, but think about who their likely person is. So this is a very busy, it's very high end, and it's pretty high-minded stuff. But this is handy. I would add this into my feed. And you'll also notice what they aren't talking about. Like they're talking about AI, and they're talking about space, and they're talking about, world politics and like themes. What they're not doing is giving, for this audience at this level, they're not giving basic financial advice. Like that's not the play. So I can tell they're going up market here just by looking at the content. This is a good podcast. We can share this one with you too. All right. Let's see. What would you suggest to the very B2B and institutionals-oriented crypto fintech company to do with their content? This is another area where, the content just gets real samey real fast. So I would say step back. Often the problem with the content is often deeper in the business. And so you have to ask yourself, what is our what for whom? That's what we call that content value proposition and business proposition. Who is the segment that you're targeting? And what are you going to offer them that they can't get anywhere else? And generally speaking, data, financial institutions, like financial data at this point is pretty easy to access. Like we are absolutely flooded with data. The challenge is figuring out what of that data I need to pay attention to, and what kind of decisions should I be making based on that data. And I think when you start to get into crypto, one, you've already got got an even bigger trust hurdle right now, just because of the developments over the last few months to overcome even the traditional financial institutions. Like I would love to have seen in that survey if they called out crypto related institutions, because I think you're starting you've got the high expectations of financial services coupled with you've got some edgy tech that makes a lot of people nervous. So you're in a weird spot. If I were doing content for this, I would look at my competitive set and I would say, okay, what information do I have core in what we do here that our competitors don't, and that my segment can't get anywhere else? Like, what can I give them that nobody else can? And I think that's going to be a tough question for some of these crypto things. I see, let's see, we got CoinChange. I dropped your blog in here. I'm actually going to pull that up and we can take a look. I'll do a little live diagnostic for you. So brace yourself here. And if anybody else wants to drop their things into, I'll also take a look. That's actually kind of fun. We can just kind of talk together about what's going well and what isn't. So here. So first of all, it's just called blog. And one of the things that you're going to find, because this is the people who are doing this really, really well, just to have a blog isn't really going to do it. You're going to have to brand this experience somehow. So, Deutsche Bank gave that podcast a name. Morgan Stanley gave that podcast a name. Cities Magazine, I think, has a name. These things are named. They are not just blog, right? So right now, what's my promise? Follow CoinChange's product updates and insightful intake takes on important crypto news. So here's another one. This is a thing that this is usually a tech company challenge more so than a financial services challenge. But crypto kind of sits in that in-between place. Your product updates cannot be the driver here. Product updates are important. You need to have a way to regularly communicate those to your current customers, as well as way bottom of the funnel, close to decision making type prospects, but that is not that really shouldn't be mixed in too much with news. So right now, I would not know, just at a glance, being very frank, why I would subscribe to this. So it's your company blog and it's got product updates, and you're telling me they're insightful intakes on important crypto news, but like I need a little more than that. So who is this for? It's what for whom? I read this and I'm going to get what? Your actual topics, these are kind of good. Okay, like I see some inconsistencies around your headers. So this is another weird, quirky thing about like, you think it doesn't matter, like capitalization and standards and things like that. But when you're trying to build and maintain trust, this is like almost like a subconscious thing. It's like, if you can't keep your headlines, like, capitalization straight, like, why should I trust you with my money? It's not logical. Like those things don't necessarily have to do with each other, but they're kind of like the brown M&Ms of content marketing here. But your actual content, these headlines are good. Like these headlines are interesting. I can see that you've got a mix of like, I'm going to say this looks like SEO content. It looks like some basic explainer type stuff. It's tagged as insights, but it's like, what are the types of cross-chain bridges? And when I see insights, I think you're going to give me a position on something. And based on that headline, I'm thinking I'm going to get educated. Both are values. Both the types of content are valuable, but try to like more clearly label them. But I'm digging these headlines. Some of these are quite interesting. So the need for interoperability of blockchains, that feels like that's going to be a position paper. Like that's my gut when I look at this. But yeah, I mean, but this also to some degree looks like the blog of any other crypto company. Like, tell me what I'm going to get here that I can't get elsewhere. I'm liking this, surviving a bear market with coin chains. Like I actually I'm into this. Like that's a position thing. I think you're kind of burying your positions inside this more generic content. Like you've got some gems in here. So that would be my main advice with that, is like start to like really focus on what you can do that nobody else can do, and don't publish anything else, which I realize is easier said than done. Alex are just like, we don't have competitors. They got bankrupt. I know, right? What I need to know, man, is how can I trust that you won't also go bankrupt? Like that's what I'm looking for in the content. Tell me what you're looking, to make me feel like you're not going to go. Yeah, no. And so Nancy, you're just like, it's smart move on DB of any economist. That is really the vibe in many cases. Like, so if you go take a look over, Aon has the one brief, these branded experiences really do elevate this. Like, and you can take advantage of your relationships. But I don't want you to feel like, oh, well, I'm not the CEO of Fortune 500 companies, but guess what? The Fortune 500 companies are probably not your customer. So go look at the customers that you do have, because presumably you want new customers that are pretty similar to the ones that you used to have or that you currently have, and leverage those relationships. The other thing that can be helpful is working with partners. So, most institutions can't do everything. So they partner with other organizations. Like, so they might have, it's like, okay, we're the banker, we're the bank relationship, but we've also got good relationships with insurance providers. Pair up for that. So if you're going to do things like webinars, or you want to co-write a guide, that's a really good way to leverage both audiences and also strengthen that relationship. Content can build relationships, not just with customers, but also with partners. Can do some cool stuff. So, all right. Well, so is there anything else that you guys have, any other questions? So those were my primary examples that I wanted to share. And at this point, if you want to drop anything else in the feedback, I'm happy to take a look and do like a real time thing. I'm happy to answer some questions. I can stay on for another like 10 minutes or so. I can show you some more of my favorite examples here. I'll just pull them up. Because there are people doing great stuff here. And I like to do it real time. I'm experimenting a little bit. Y'all can tell me what you think about this approach. Typically, I've done screenshots inside of a PowerPoint, but that just always seemed kind of boring to me. I wanted to just dynamically pull them up. Here we go. I'm an asset manager. So that's kind of interesting. State Street said, hey, who are you, lady? So that's going to shape what kind of content that I see. But this one is also like another one this is not about State Street. This is thought leadership. And then you get down there and yeah, there's the company stuff, but they're showing it to me through the lens of my segment. I said, I'm an asset manager. So this is what they showed me. I can tell they did a segmented approach on this one. This one's also kind of interesting. PIMCO asked me to also identify, and I actually really like these, like this kind of approach where if you, again, you need to get your segments. Let's say I'm coming in as an individual investor. And I said, don't save my selection. Because then I'm going to copy it. And I wonder if I can side by side it out. They're not going to let me do that. That'd be too fun. So they are shaping what they show me based on who I said I was. These are good headlines, y'all. It pays to be defensive. And they're calling it a webcast, but it's multimedia. There's a lot of multimedia play. Multimedia, I would also say, because I know I've been talking a lot about AI, and there's a lot of content that's very easy to make with AI, but AI also has the power to really undermine trust in content because it isn't accurate. Like you can't use it to fact check, and you have to be very, very careful. If you're in financial services and you want to use generative AI to scale up your content, I would stay away from ChatGPT. JP Morgan Chase already banned it. Like a number of institutions already banned it. But Writer, the tool that we use here at RepCap, is a SOC 2 compliant generative AI tool that you can use to create essentially a walled garden to make your content and your brand. So if you want to talk about AI and content, financial services, happy to talk about that too. But you got to be careful with this, like in terms of what you're saying. But what I want to say is that video can't be scaled as easily. Relationships can't be scaled. The content, multimedia content created from those relationships, that is precious. I mean, here, PIMCO went and talked to Ben Bernanke. You know, like this is timely stuff. Like I would hit play on this if I'm an advisor. I would love to know what Ben Bernanke thinks about this now, watching all this play out. Pause or pivot. This is good writing. And you'll notice it doesn't look exactly the same as the others. Like it really does stand out. And then, American Express, I'm going to say, was also a pioneer in this, in terms of their original stuff that they created for small business owners in particular. I think sometimes people may not realize that American Express invented Small Business Saturday. They came up with that. So it's kind of cool. And they've kind of been a pioneer in creating this kind of content. And they do a lot of profiles of small business owners because they want small business customers. These are pretty cool. They've got a nice raw, kind of like a little bit authentic feel to it. It's not as polished as what you might have thought you might assume you'd get from Amex. It feels real. Customer stories are really powerful. Finance my business, manage my business, grow my business. This is another example of like they aren't limiting the content strictly to what Amex sells. This is not a bunch of content about choosing the right business credit card. They thought about the segment and they said, what does this segment need? And that's the content they created. And they grouped everything around these categories. So their customer stories are organized around start my business, finance business, grow my business, manage my business. I love it. This is well structured. Let's see, do we have any other pieces here? Okay, so I guess no more. I'm going to show you one more and then we can call it a day. I'm going to show you one more of my favorites. I can't have both screens up at the same time. I have to get myself a dual monitor apparently. All right, let's go take a look at Sophie. So this was another one. This is a lender, and they also allow you to segment out. So you hit their Learn channel, and you can go look at content. This is educational content, and you can click on what you want based on kind of your topical interest. And some of this is very basic stuff. You can tell this is for SEO. What is a limit order? What is shorting a stock? But they still managed to organize it in a way that I think doesn't just feel like SEO content when presented this way. Short-term versus long-term disability, There's some calculators, but it's all kind of just financial clarity. Well, that gave me, all right, there we go. I was like, that gave me nothing. But the pictures are nice, This is where they do the definition stuff. This is good. They actually did a glossary. This is a very well-organized glossary. And glossaries are hot right now. No, it's a good site. It reminds me of the city one, frankly. And that makes sense because they have competing segments. Let's see. Has any financial services tried anything like a survey of customers or investors to see if they really understand financial terms or investments? So you could do that, right? So there's sometimes, I like assessments and self-assessments. I think one of the challenges is you're going to find is that people don't necessarily want to admit that they don't know things. So it would be an interesting thing to have a quiz like that. Like, so if you could figure out like, hey, how much do you really know about X? Those kinds of self-assessments are kind of fun. I think they will just, the concern will be of the person taking is, what will you do with my data? And as long as you're very clear with them, like this is for, you're going to, from a compliance standpoint, you're going to have to say this is for educational purposes only, that sort of thing. But otherwise, I think those can be fun. Because the answer is that they don't. But I think somebody's like, one of them, I think I saw a quiz in here in one of these very quick that had a similar. Try a quiz here. Yeah, you can do a few of those, but just be careful. Like that's an area where I would say be careful in what you're going to do with the data and being very clear about what you're going to do. So. All right. Well, it looks like that wraps us up on our questions. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. We'll send over the recording of this to the rest of the group. You should receive that, if not today, by tomorrow. And we'll also pass along some of these links of things to say. And I hope you find some inspiration. So, thank y'all.